Greetings, my name is Lenard M. Canja, code 9393, a first-year chemical engineering student from the University of Mindanao. For today's video, I'm gonna talk about arrays. So, what is an array? So, an array is a variable of the same type that can be referred by a common name. An array is a collection of elements of the same type placed in contiguous memory locations that can be individually referred by using an index to a unique identifier. So we have three different types of arrays. So a single-dimensional array, a double-dimensional arrays, and a multi-dimensional arrays. So for the question number 3, how to declare a one-dimensional array. So declaring a one-dimensional array, we follow a syntax. And this syntax has a structure that we must follow. So it must have a data type. This data type can be anything. It could be a integer data type, a character data type, a double data type, or a string data type. So also, your one-dimensional array should have an array name. It represents your elements. It is the name of your elements, so we can identify it. So next is, your one-dimensional array should have a number of elements. So the number of elements determine the number of elements, and we can identify it using an index. So an index or your elements can be identified using an index. So this index starts with the number 0. So here's an example. So in this example, our data type is an integer, and its array name is a Toyota car, and number of elements is 5. So using an index, we can identify it by counting it from the number 0. So this is our element number 0, number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. So we can identify it when we are declaring it. So in this example, we're using a string data type. So its array name are superheroes, and its number of elements is 3. So 0, 1, 2. So Spider-Man, Superman, and Iron Man. In this last example, we are using a double. So a double data type, and its array name is grid, and it has 4 elements. So its elements are 75, 80, 85, 90. So that's how you declare a wide-dimensional array. So for the question number 4, how to declare a two-dimensional arrays and give examples. So first, what is a two-dimensional array? So a two-dimensional array is a collection of fixed number of components arranged in rows and columns. So I can explain it further. So in declaring a two-dimensional array, also we follow a certain syntax and a structure. So just like a one-dimensional array, it has a data type. It has also have an array name, but it has a 2 number of elements. So these 2 number of elements represent our rows and columns. So the first element represent our rows, and the second elements represent our columns. So that is how you declare a two-dimensional array. So here are the examples. So in this example, we are using a integer data type with an array name of money, and our row of elements is 4. So we can see here we have 4 rows. Here 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. That is our rows, and we have a 2 column of elements. So 1 and 2 columns. So that is our difference between one-dimensional and two-dimensional array. So take note of that. So here is another example. So in this another example, we're using a string data type with an array name of lovers, and with a 3 rows, 1, 2, 3, and 2 columns. So that is how you identify two-dimensional array from one-dimensional array. And next is this example. It is interesting because it is not like the other 2 examples. So we can input a two-dimensional array in a manner like this, horizontal. So you can do that as long as you're using a curly bracket to separate it. So that is how you declare a two-dimensional array. For question number 5, how to declare a multi-dimensional arrays, we also follow a syntax or a certain structure just like one-dimensional array and double-dimensional array. So we have a data type, an array name, but unlike those 2 past arrays, it has 3 number of elements. So In this first element, it determines the row. In the second, determine the column. And the third, determine the group of elements present in the program. So in this example number 1, we're using a integer data type. It has a value array name, and it has 2 rows. So 1, 2. And it has 3 columns. 1, 1, 2, 3. And it has 2 groups of elements. So here 1, 2. So in this second example, we're also using a multidimensional array. So with a data type of string and an array name of names. So it has 2 rows, 1, 2. And it has 2 columns, 1, 2. And also 2 groups of elements, 1 and 2. So in the third examples, we're using also an integer data type with a array name of numbers. Also, we're using the 2, 2, 2, 2 rows, 2 columns, and 2 groups of elements. So 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2. So that is how you declare a multidimensional arrays. For the 6th question on how to initialize the elements of a single or one-dimensional array, we also follow a syntax. Just like we discussed from the past questions, we're using a structure which starts with a data type, an array name, and the number of elements. So here are the example, another example. So we're using a data type integer data type, and array name of Toyota cars. The number of elements 5. So here we can see we have 5 number of elements. So to identify how we can make it appear in the computer, we're using an index. So identify it. So this is our element number 0, number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. So if you wish to appear it on your screen, we can use the cout, Toyota cars, double dot. And also Toyota cars, our array, Toyota cars with element number 2. So if you build it, the number appearing it is the 7766, which is our element number 2. So in our second example, we're using a string data type and colors with 3 elements. So we have element number 0, red, element number 1, blue, and element number 2, yellow. So cout colors. So if you wish to appear the color element number 0, which is red, you can input colors element number 0. So that is how you initialize a one-dimensional array. Question number 7, how to initialize the elements of two-dimensional array. So the initialization of two-dimensional array will also follow a syntax just like one-dimensional array. So this syntax follows structure. So first it must have a data type. It could be a character, an integer, a double, or a string. And also it must have an array name and the number of elements. So just like I discussed from the past, so a two-dimensional array has 2 elements. So we can see it in this example. So in this example, we are using a integer data type with an array of ages with 2 elements, 2 and 3. This represent our row and this represent our columns. So we have 2 rows. So 11, 22, 33, 44, 55, 66, and 3 columns. This, and this. So to make it appear, we're using a loop structure. So if you build it, it appears these numbers, all these numbers for this loop. Another example is a string data type. We're using an animals as an array name. It has 2 rows, 1 and 2 rows, and 3 columns. So 1, 2, 3. Also, we are using the same loop for loops to make it appear in screen when you build it. So that is how you initialize a multi-dimensional array. For question number 9 and 10, how to input and output an array, it's simple. So just like before, we are following a syntax. You must input its data type. It could be integer, it could be an string, it could be anything as long as it is valid. So also it must have a array name. You must input the array name, like these examples here. And also your array must have elements. You must input its elements. So if you input element number 5, you put 5 elements in your curly brackets. If you have 3 elements, you must input 3 elements in your curly brackets. And if you're using a double dimensional array, so you must also input at least, like in this example 2, 3, you must at least input 6 number of elements in your array. So let us remember that in C++, each element is an array is associated with numbers. So we must remember that for us to input an array, so the number is known as an array index. So these are called array index. It is our identifier to identify our elements. So we can access the elements of an array by using those indices. So few things to remember. The array indicates start with 0. So to count, must start with number 0. So element number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And meaning that x is 0 is preferred to the element stored in the index 0. So if the size of an array is n, for example 5, size of elements are 5, so the last element stored of index is -1. So this is our index number 4. So 5 minus 1 is equal to 4. So to output it, to make it appear on our screens computer regarding to the question number 10, you can use cout function and choose the number of elements you want to appear. So like in these examples. So if you are using a double dimensional array, you can use the for loops to make it appear just like this. I program it to make it more understandable. In this example also, I'm using a for loop structure to make it appear all these elements here in this curly bracket. So let's build it so you can understand. So remember, we want to appear the element number 2, which is 7766, the color number 0, which is red, and also we want to appear all these elements, this and this. So we can see out that using a loop structure, or just input your array and its element number. So let's build it. So as can you see, the Toyota cars that we want to appear is the number 2, which is 7766, and the colors that we want to appear, which is the index number 0, is red, and the all ages from the double array here, and also the name of animals 0001 dog cat also appear. So that's it. That is how you input and output an array. Thank you.